So we have seen spatial view, we have seen time view, which is the temporal view. Now let's go to the spectral view, which is the frequency domain view. So if you have taken any course in the past on signal processing or digital signal processing, you might have come across Fourier analysis. What that means is representing a time domain signal in its frequency equivalent way or in its frequency domain. To break it down further, it's basically how many spectral components or how many sinusoids and cosine waves are required at what amplitude to construct this time domain signal, right? So you can always construct a time domain signal by adding a bunch of sine waves and cos waves. What are those cos waves? What are those frequencies? What are those amplitudes to get back the time signal, time domain signal? That's what the spectral analysis is, right? So we can break down the channel, which is, this is the temporal view of the channel. I can put a spectral view, but just taking the Fourier transform of this one, I can have something like this. Again, the black one here represents a very sharp cutoff. The other ones have a roll off in them. This looks like more like a low pass filter. Sometimes the channel ends up being like a low pass filter or a band pass filter. So that's what the spectral view clearly tells you, that the channel is a filter. And again, coherence bandwidth is another term equivalent to the coherence time here, but this is the frequency domain version of that. What that means is you can always predict the channel to be with what happens to the channel or the signal attenuation within a certain frequencies. Beyond certain frequencies, you'll not be able to predict them. It becomes unpredictable, and we call that limit as the coherence bandwidth. So just to give you a sense of what bandwidth means here, you can think of it like a gate. Signals trying to pass through that. Now this gate should allow it. And how do we find out this gate and see like what is the width of this gate or size of this gate? We can construct it from the reflected samples. We can see how the channel is behaving in terms of the reflections and the signal path that it's going through. If we take a Fourier transform of that, we can get a window, something like this, and then we can say how big the window is or how small the window is. So we can actually represent these samples as pk. P just represents the power as a notation here, which is basically the attenuation square or the amplitude square. That'll be your pk. And if you take the Fourier, this is just a Fourier transform formula, you'll get your spectral view of that. Okay, now again, going back to the link budget or the system architecture diagram, I just want to keep constructing it based on everything that we learned. I just wanted to keep updating the diagram. So if you see this diagram, it's pretty much the same diagram. I still have my front ends here, TX front end, RX front end, and then I have my baseband processing. But then I've also added another detail here, which is the DAC and ADC. So the baseband processes the signal in digital domain and converts it to analog. So you need to have a digital to analog converter. And then these analog signals are upconverted and radiated through the antenna system. Similarly, on the other side, the incoming signal needs to be digitized. So we have an ADC, and then you have your baseband processing. But now let's see how the channel fits into, or whatever the multipath that we studied fits into this system here. Let's put some notations here. Let's call the signal that is processed and sent out of the baseband as X. So I'm marking it as bold X, which is a representation of an array. So you have X1, X2, you can have K symbols that are being sent out. And let's have three surfaces here where the signal is bouncing off and getting reflected. So let's have one path and call it H1. So the signal gets attenuated by this amount H1. And let's have another path and let's denote it as H2. The signal attenuates by that amount. And then the third path, H3. Now the channel is represented with three taps. We call it TAPS taps. It can be three or it can be more. In this example, I just picked three. So H1, H2, H3, it's three channel taps here. So now we have this symbol X, which is a bold X, and now we have a bold H as well. So what's actually happening here is the channel is giving you multiple copies of the signal. That's another way to look at it. You send a signal, it's not getting corrupted or anything, you just get multiple copies of it. And what happens is that all these copies, they can interfere with each other, right? In a way that you might not be able to distinguish between them. So it happens in that way. So we need to somehow mathematically represent this relationship between this X and this H. So let's continue further. So we can call that as Y. So Y is nothing but the received signal. That is basically a combination of delayed versions of the transmitted signal, or delayed and attenuated versions of the transmitted signals. So that represents a convolution between H and X. So that's what Y is. We'll actually do the proper notation in the next slide. And from Y, the goal of this receiver, we call it the baseband receiver processing, is to extract X hat. We cannot extract x exactly, which is our goal, but we can get an x estimate. That's why I presented x hat. The goal is to use this y and get this x again, because we have to undo all these corruptions that is happening in the channel. Again, now that I have given the symbols and their notations and where they fit in, now we can see how they all combine together. So y is defined as x star h. Star here denotes convolution, not multiplication. So x star h. And then you always have noise that is being added by the electronics or the antenna, the thermal noise as we call it. So y is the accurate way to represent y is x star h plus n. H, x, and y are defined here, but we know what it is. And on the receiver side, this is what we need to do. We have y, we need to combine it with E. E is another filtering operation on Y that should give you X. Now, how do we find out this E? What is the right E for that? E has to be found out in a way such that the error between the estimated symbols and the actual symbols should be minimized. Now, how do we even know that what is the error is, because we don't know these symbols, right? So there is a methodology that is being used, what we call it as training symbols or pilot symbols. So before you send the data, the transmitter always sends some known symbols. What this means is that the receiver already has an idea of what this should be. In that way, it can estimate the MSE and it can find this E that can decode your signal. So it uses these training symbols to find out the channel, which is called channel estimation. And once it finds out the channel, it applies the inverse of that to extract your data. And that's when the data transmission starts. And then once the data transmission ends, you send training symbols again, because the channel is always going to change. People are going to move around and things might move around. The channel might also change, right? So we need to send the training symbols again. So again, these are training symbols, or we can also call them as pilot symbols, because they're heading in the beginning and then giving the direction for this data to go through. So that's an overview of channel estimation and equalization. Okay, now I'm jumping to the next topic here on MIMO systems. So far, we have covered a SISO system, single input, single output. So you might have seen there's one antenna on the transmitter and one antenna on the receiver. And we have seen all the math that's going on, all the bounces, reflections that are happening, and different power calculations. What is the antenna gain? What is the noise power? How do we add it all? How to calculate the signal to noise ratio? But again, everything was for a single input and single output. That means single transmit antenna and single receive antenna. And now we're just going to extend it to multiple antenna systems here. But then that brings some more complications. But I'll try to keep it as fundamental as possible and then show you a few applications on that. So some synonyms here, we can call it multi-antenna systems, antenna array, MISO. MISO is multiple input, single output, or it can be single input, multiple output. We can also call it, there's an extension to this, massive MIMO or beamforming. People also call it space-time processing, because now that we have multiple antennas, it's not just time and frequency, there is also space that is being involved, and that needs to be carefully managed. So that's why it's sometimes space-time processing. A quick motivation introduction to this topic on MIMO is there's always an increasing capacity demand, as new technologies come up. Currently we are trending towards 5G. If you see the fundamental need there is increasing demand. We're just not able to support all the demand that is being consumed by people now. There's an increasing demand. And as you know, we all have a spectrum shortage. These devices work in a limited spectrum range. And we have to buy the licenses for that spectrum. There's an auction going on. All those things are happening. The licensing costs are high. So there's only so much we can stretch on the spectrum side. So now we need one more dimension to work on. So we have, there's not much we can do in time, because the communication has to happen within that time. You have spectrum, that is the other dimension. And now the third dimension comes into picture, which is the space. How can we exploit the space? As you see, devices are growing in size. Earlier it was a very smaller phone that fits into your palm, but now you need two hands to hold a phone. The device sizes are growing, and you have TVs that are wirelessly connected. So you have more size there. So basically it gives you more opportunities to put more antennas. So instead of having one antenna, you can put multiple antennas and collect the signal in different directions. And that gives you more possibilities there. If the signal dies in one direction, you can get it in a different direction. So that gives you some sort of diversity. Not just that, you can actually send different signals through different antennas and get more capacity. So without stretching the spectrum, without need for more spectrum, you are just using the space, the new dimension, and then you're extending it. This is applied to Wi-Fi as well. So Wi-Fi is also very much crowded. So if you're living in an apartment complex and if everybody is working remotely at the same time, you can see there is a drag in your Wi-Fi because everybody's using the same channel and it's overlapping. There's a lot more interference. So the channels are limited. The other direction that we can trend towards is the multiple antenna systems, which is nothing but the space dimension. Just an extension to the model that we studied. So now if you see this notation, we can just play with the math here a little bit. So instead of having a small x, I make it a capital X because capital X here, if it's capital and bold, I just assume it's a matrix. Whereas if it's a capital and not bold, then it's probably a vector. Okay, so this is like a vector. So whatever we had for each antenna, we had for multiple antennas here. So we align them in this way and have a series of symbols. And then we have H now. H now becomes a matrix. If I have four antenna elements, sorry, if I have two antenna transmitting and two antennas receiving, then I can have a 2x2 matrix, H1 going from antenna 1 to antenna 1. And all these things can be constructed, the cross antennas and then antenna 2 to antenna 2. And then we have a series of symbols that are being received, which is the white. Now it's a matrix multiplication type of representation here, assuming that there is only one path from one antenna to the other antenna. If we have multiple paths here, just like how we had in the previous system, then it gets more complicated, which we're not going to get into. Let's just assume that there is not too much reflections here. There's only one path from one antenna to the other antenna. And that way it simplifies the model a little bit. And we can actually formulate it like a nice matrix multiplication here. And of course, there is again noise here. So for a MIMO system, a few key points to remember here is that you can either get a capacity gain or a diversity gain. So by capacity gain, what I mean is you can send different data streams through different antennas and treat it like one link here and the other. So it's like if you have like four antennas here and four antennas here, you're like actually multiplying your capacity by 4 if you get the right channel matrix coordinates for that. Or what you can do is that you can send the same symbols through all the antennas. Now, what's the benefit of doing that? Because if one thing fails, the other one could receive it. So you get what is called as a diversity gain. So you can either get this one or that, not both. But again, if you want to get capacity gain, there's only so much you can get. So if you have 3 on one side and 4 on the other side, the capacity gain can be 3. Sorry, there's an error here. This should be min of n comma n. So if you have 2 and 4, then the total capacity gain that you can get is 2. And another thing for the antenna, for the MIMO to work, is the antennas need to be placed sufficiently apart from each other. What this means is that if the antennas are too close to each other, then you're not going to get any good benefit out of this. So think of it, if you are trying to achieve diversity, thinking that if you lose it in one antenna, you can get it in the other antenna, then they have to be sufficiently apart so that you have that decorrelation among them. If they're very close to each other, if one of them dies, probably the other one is also going to die, right? So the distance between the antennas is a critical parameter here. Even if you want to get the spatial multiplexing gain or a capacity gain, they still need to be sufficiently apart so that this matrix becomes invertible and you can get back your X. So today we're not going into the channel estimation and equalization for MIMO, but if I had to go into that, if I had to do a similar work that I just did for a SISO system, then you can see why the distance between the antennas have to be sufficient so that the MIMO works. And again, channel estimation is also a key challenge here. You have to estimate the channel corresponding to each pair pretty much. So from here to here, from here to here. So when you're sending pilot symbols or training symbols on one antenna, the other antenna should be muted. So there is a very methodical way to actually estimate and equalize the channel for a MIMO system. Now, again, I can extrapolate the diagrams that I had earlier. So instead of having one element, we can just copy paste it and create multiple elements here. But if you see the receiver side, it has to have a joint processing, which is something we're not discussing today, but from a diagrammatic perspective, I can tell, we have to invert the H, just like how we did for SISO. There has to be some sort of joint spatial processing that has to happen so that you decouple the streams that you get. Fundamentally, you have to say that which one was transmitted in which transmit stream. Getting into the beamforming concept, as I said, this is going to be a little bit of an extension to what we studied, but without too much efforts in here. So again, this is an antenna array, beam steering, direction finding, beam combining. LTE also calls it as layering, and massive MIMO. So these are all synonyms for that. What this means is MIMO requires placing multiple antennas on both ends, right? What beamforming does is that it relaxes that requirement on the cell phone side so that you don't have to change your cell phone every time, but you can have an upgrade on your cell tower. So the cell tower can be upgraded with more antennas. In that way, you can get more a combined gain. So if you can see, all these colors are different beam patterns that are pointing towards each cell phone. And these cell phones can be anywhere, and you can get a very ad hoc focused service. So that's the idea of beamforming. But again, there's a lot of math to prove it and see how it works. But I just wanted to show you an overview here. And again, what happens to the block diagram? The receiver side remains simple, whereas the transmit side, which is on the base station side, we can add more elements there. We can do it in an analog way, which means on the front end side, we can add some circuitry that can combine the signal from these elements in such a way that it is steered towards this particular receiver. And on the receiver, nothing will have to change. It can remain as the same legacy receiver, as we call it. Similarly, it can be done in digital side. The pre-coding, it need not be done on the front end with after the RF front end. It can be done before the processing. We can do it digitally, and still the receiver will not even know what's happening, but it'll just it'll be able to decode the signal because all the work is now loaded into this front end part. I'll give you a quick introduction on how these things apply to the industry as of today. I picked this example from LTE spec, 3GPP, that is currently used. And if you're using an LTE phone, then this is what it is being used. If you remember, a few slides back, we did discuss the time and frequency or a temporal and a spectral perspective. So if you see this, each grid here in LTE, each grid here, this axis represents time and this axis represents frequency. Okay, so what this means is that this is how the symbols are arranged. If it's red, RE represents to a resource element. So each one is a resource element in this one. And together we call this as a resource block. So we can allocate data on each one of them. But some of them are marked as RS. So what RS means here is reference symbols, which are nothing but pilots or training symbols. So this is the time axis. So if you can flip the slides, then I can tell you that this will be like the time axis, this will be like the frequency axis. So in a particular frequency, you're arranging the symbols in a way, all your data symbols, and then you have red, which is your pilot or your training symbols, and then your data, and then your pilot. So that's how this data and pilots are being annotated here. And similarly, it's done in different frequencies with different order. So this is all standardized. So that's what it means. Your phones are already designed to detect this type of a pattern in it. So again, each grid is a time frequency grid that shows how the data and pilots are being allocated. That's it. And we can also extend it to multiple antenna systems. So this is how it looks for one antenna. This is how it looks for two antennas. And you can also have four antennas, and each antenna has its own combination here of how to allocate the time frequency grid, where to put the data, where to put the reference symbols or the pilots. And LTE operates in different modes. It can do a classical single antenna transmission, like the SISO system that we discussed in the beginning. It can also do a diversity type of transmission, which is basically sending the same data over all the antennas. It can also do multiplexing, which means it can send different data and create more capacity. There are several varieties of this. It can also do beamforming. It can switch to that mode. But again, these are all in release 8. And then each release is a release of an LTE. It's an upgraded version of LTE. Currently, we have up to release 12, but I'm just showing here for simplicity up to release 10 as to what are different layers of multiplexing. So I'm showing in this diagram only 4 antennas, but it can do 8 layers. So layers essentially means the number of data streams that you can create, which is equivalent to the number of antennas that you have. Again, you can refer to it offline after this class, see how the resource block structure is, how these things are arranged, and how a receiver is designed to process them. Any type of job these days that involves LTE related work. So for example, in Qualcomm or Apple or any of these companies, even in Samsung, where they have these type of devices that are being manufactured, everything has to adhere to these type of standards and the jobs that they offer at this level of LTE understanding. But always they get down, what is the resource blocks? They try to ask you, like, what does it mean by time and frequency spread, how it is being allocated, what is pilot, how is the channel estimation done? Ultimately, it gets down to the basics. I hardly see an interview that just touches upon the high level concepts and not going into the basics. Generally, they all tend to get into the fundamentals. So yeah, I believe with that, I will stop here. Thank you.